The words sliced through the boardroom like shards of glass. "You are no longer valuable, Maren." The silence that followed was suffocating. The air conditioner hummed, and the clicking of someone's pen, once faint now thunderous, drilled into my skull. My hands trembled on the polished walnut table, the reflection of my pale face staring back at me from its gleaming surface. I had spent 10 years in this company. 10 years building something out of nothing, giving up weekends, vacations, even the small fragments of myself that once resembled a life. And now, Jonathan Reeves, the CEO I had once admired, the man who had mentored me, trusted me, or so I thought, was looking at me like I was a discarded tool. "Excuse me." My voice cracked before I could steady it. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, expression calm, almost rehearsed. "You've been underperforming for months, and your conduct has raised concerns. It's time for a change." I could feel the gazes of the executive team piercing through me. Cold, indifferent, some even pitying. But none of them spoke. Not even Tessa, the company's CFO, and my supposed best friend. I looked at her, searching for something. An explanation, a flicker of support, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her perfectly manicured nails picked at the corner of a notepad. Her lips pressed tight. And that's when it hit me. The tension. The silence. The scripted tone of Jonathan's words. Something was off. 3 hours later, I sat in my car, parked in the shadow of the company's glass tower. My badge lay on the passenger seat, next to the cardboard box of my things. A framed photo of me and Tessa at last year's retreat, my Employee of the Year plaque, and a small succulent Jonathan had given me. "To growth," he'd said when he handed it to me. Now it looked as wilted as I felt. I stared at the building that had been my second home, my battlefield, my identity, and wondered how it all unraveled so fast. No, not fast. If I was honest with myself, it had been slow, painfully slow, like the faint cracking of glass before it finally shatters. Jonathan had grown distant months ago. Meetings that used to run late into the night became private sessions with Tessa. She started speaking for him in board updates, taking projects I had initiated and presenting them as her own. And the looks, those small, knowing glances they exchanged during meetings when they thought no one was watching. Had noticed. I had chosen not to believe. That evening I called Jonathan. He didn't pick up. Then I called Tessa. Straight to voicemail. Fine. If they wanted to erase me from the company overnight, they could at least have the courage to tell me why. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. I still had access to my work email. Apparently, HR hadn't revoked it yet. Mistake. My pulse quickened as I typed keywords. Tessa, Jonathan, transfer, confidential. Within minutes I found a thread. Hidden deep in an internal exchange between Jonathan and legal counsel. The subject line, Executive Transition Plan, confidential. Clicked it open. And there it was. A proposal to merge Tessa's department with mine. A merger that would effectively eliminate my role, giving her control over my projects, my clients, my entire division. The date on the document was 3 months old. I scrolled further. There was another attachment, a scanned NDA with both their signatures. The final line of Jonathan's email to legal read, Maren's termination should be positioned as a performance issue. Tessa will assume her accounts immediately after. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Performance issue. That was their story, their justification, their betrayal. But what tore through me most wasn't the professional sabotage. It was personal. I had trusted both of them with my ideas, my loyalty, my time. And in Jonathan's case, with something far more dangerous. My heart clenched. Because months ago, when I was still naive enough to believe his late-night texts meant something more than mentorship, I had let myself fall into the illusion of us. It had started innocently. Dinners after work. Drinks at the Four Seasons bar when he said he needed someone who understood. His marriage, he'd said, was cold, broken. I told myself I wasn't the type to get involved with a married man. But loneliness is a clever liar. One night he kissed me in the elevator. And I didn't stop him. For weeks afterward I lived in that fragile, dangerous fantasy, that he cared for me, that there was a future. He whispered promises he never meant to keep. And when Tessa started spending more time in his office, I brushed off the unease, convincing myself it was just work. But now the truth was staring me in the face. He hadn't chosen me. He had used me, both professionally and personally, until I was no longer useful. And Tessa, the woman I had called my sister in all but blood, she had been sleeping with him too. The next morning I walked into the office one last time. HR had called to schedule my exit interview, but I had another purpose. Tessa's office door was slightly ajar. I could hear laughter inside, hers and Jonathan's. That sound, once familiar, now made my stomach twist. I pushed the door open. Both froze. Jonathan's tie was loosened. Tessa's lipstick smudged. "Well," I said softly, "I guess the merger's complete." Tessa's face went pale. "Maren, this isn't. Save it." My voice shook, but I held my ground. "You could have just told me. Either of you. Instead, you staged a public execution." Jonathan cleared his throat, attempting composure. "You're making this personal when it's purely professional." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Professional? That's rich, coming from the man who couldn't keep it in his pants long enough to finish a budget review." He flinched, eyes darting toward the frosted glass walls where shadows of passing employees flickered. He cared more about reputation than anything else. I leaned closer. "Don't worry. I won't expose your affair. That would be too merciful." Then I placed a small flash drive on her desk. Tessa frowned. "What's that?" "Proof," I said simply. "Of your transition plan. Of every backdated file, every confidential email, every account you illegally merged before I was terminated. Legal will love it." Jonathan's jaw clenched. "You wouldn't." Smiled. "I already did." The fallout came fast. By the end of the week, word had spread across the board. Internal audit launched an investigation. Jonathan was placed on leave pending review. Tessa resigned before she could be questioned. And me. I walked away. Not triumphant, not healed, but free. Some nights, I still replay his words in my head. "You are no longer valuable, Maren." Maybe he was right in a way. I wasn't valuable to him anymore. But value isn't given. It's reclaimed. I started consulting for smaller firms. No corner office, no corporate armor. Just me rebuilding from the ruins. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I remember what it felt like to be betrayed by people who once felt like family. There's no clean break from that kind of wound. It lingers, reshaping you. But I've learned something Jonathan never understood. People aren't assets. They aren't expendable. And the moment you forget that, you lose everything that ever truly mattered. When the company's quarterly report leaked months later, Jonathan's name was nowhere on it. Neither was Tessa's. But at the bottom, in the acknowledgments for strategic restructuring, one line caught my eye. "Special thanks to independent consultant Maren Avery for her contributions." I closed the document and smiled faintly. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel discarded. Felt seen. And maybe that was the quietest revenge of all.